My name is Samantha, I'm 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one holding everything together. The responsible child. The problem solver. The fixer. Somewhere along the way, that role morphed into something uglier, my family's wallet. I grew up in a small town in Oregon, the kind of place where everyone knows what car you drive, who you're dating, and whether your parents are behind on their mortgage. My parents, Robert and Denise, owned a modest convenience store. It paid the bills, but barely. My older brother Ryan, now 31, has always been restless, chasing one scheme after another: sports betting, get-rich-quick jobs, failed business ideas. My younger sister Jessica, 26, has that kind of charm that lets her coast through life. Somehow, she's always been seen as the fragile one who needed protecting, while I was the strong one, the dependable one, the one who didn't need help. That label stuck, and I leaned into it. In school, I worked hard, earned scholarships, and eventually landed a spot at the University of Washington in Seattle. My parents like to tell people, Samantha's the smart one, she'll do fine on her own. And they weren't wrong. I graduated with a finance degree and landed a job at a mid-sized investment firm right out of college. Over the years, I worked my way up to financial consultant, with a solid salary, a nice apartment, and the beginnings of a life I was proud of. But independence came with a price. While Ryan and Jessica leaned on my parents leaned on me. At first, it was little things. Sam, can you cover the electric bill this month? Business was slow. Or, could you loan Ryan a couple hundred until payday? I told myself it was temporary. Everyone hits rough patches, right? Then the amounts grew. When Jessica changed her major 3 times and needed an extra semester to graduate, guess who picked up the tab? Me. When Ryan lost his job at a car dealership and couldn't make his rent, I transferred him $2,000. When my parents maxed out their credit cards, I wrote a check to help them get back on track. Each time, they promised it was the last. Each time, they swore they'd handle things better moving forward. Of course, that never happened. Looking back, I can see how easily I slid into the role. I told myself I was just being a good daughter, a good sister. After all, wasn't I blessed to have a stable career? Wasn't it my duty to share that blessing with family? My mom would say things like, God gave you success so you could take care of us. And every time, I swallowed the guilt and reached for my checkbook. It wasn't until I met Alex, my boyfriend, that I started to question whether any of this was normal. Alex and I met at a volunteer event for a housing nonprofit. He's kind, steady, the kind of person who notices things I tend to gloss over. Early on, he pointed out how my phone seemed to light up with family calls only when they needed something. Do they ever ask about you? He asked once, after I hung up from a 40-minute conversation with my mom that had ended with me agreeing to send money for Jessica's car insurance. I laughed it off at the time. They're just going through a rough patch, I said. But he frowned and replied, Sam, they've been in a rough patch the entire time I've known you. That sentence lodged itself in my brain like a pebble in a shoe. I kept walking, but I couldn't stop feeling it. By last summer, the pattern was impossible to ignore. I'd sent Ryan money 3 separate times to cover emergencies, though later I learned at least one of those emergencies was him losing badly at a poker night. Jessica asked me to co-sign a lease for an apartment in Portland she couldn't afford, promising it was just until she got on her feet. My parents called about medical bills, repairs for the store, even help paying their property taxes. If I added up everything I'd given them over the years, it was more than enough for a down payment on my own house, a dream I'd had to postpone because my savings never seemed to grow. But when I hinted at maybe saying no, the guilt rolled in heavy. Family helps family, my dad would say. You know we'd do the same for you. The problem was, I couldn't remember a single time they had. Still, I stayed in the role. It was easier than the alternative, facing the truth that my family didn't see me as a daughter or a sister, but as a resource. The walking, talking safety net they could call whenever life caught up with their choices. The cracks started showing last fall, when Alex and I talked seriously about the future. He wanted to move in together, maybe even start saving for a place of our own. But Sam, he said gently, we can't plan our lives if you're constantly funding everyone else's. He wasn't wrong. The numbers on my spreadsheets never lied. But letting go of that role felt like betraying the people I loved. I told myself that things would change soon, that maybe after Dad's upcoming 50th birthday, the family would reset, start treating me differently. It was supposed to be a big celebration, half the town invited, according to my mom. I thought maybe this time, they'd remember I was more than just the wallet. I was wrong. When my dad turned 50, it was supposed to be a milestone. A half-century of life, of running the store, of raising 3 kids. My mom made it sound like a celebration big enough to rival a wedding. We'll have a live band, a big dinner, even a slideshow of pictures from his childhood, she said on the phone one September evening. Everyone's going to be there. I imagined long tables in their backyard, strings of lights hanging from the trees, and neighbors gathered with paper plates full of barbecue. My dad isn't sentimental, but he loves a crowd, loves being at the center of a celebration. The idea of being there, of sharing that with him, gave me a flicker of warmth I hadn't felt toward my family in a long time. I told my mom I'd come, and that Alex would be with me. It was important to me that he finally meet everyone. We'd been dating nearly 2 years, and though he'd heard countless stories, he'd only met my parents briefly when they came to Seattle once. This would be the real introduction, the big family party, where he could see the people who shaped me. I even asked if she needed help with the costs. Do you want me to pitch in? I offered, already half prepared for her to say yes. To my surprise, she laughed and said, No, sweetheart. We've got it covered. For once, I let myself believe it. The weeks leading up to the party, I threw myself into preparations. I bought my dad a beautiful leather watch, expensive, but worth it, I thought. He'd always worn cheap digital ones from the drugstore, and I imagined his face when he opened something timeless, something he could keep for years. For my mom, I picked out a handmade shawl from a local artisan in Seattle, woven in shades of green and blue that reminded me of the Oregon coast. For Jessica, I found a designer tote she'd been eyeing online, and for Ryan, a set of noise-canceling headphones he'd once mentioned wanting. It was my way of saying, see? I remember you. I care. Alex teased me gently one night as I spread wrapping paper and ribbons across my living room floor. You put more thought into these gifts than most people do for their own wedding, he said, smiling as he taped down the edge of paper for me. They deserve something nice, I told him automatically. But the words felt hollow even as they left my mouth. Do they deserve it? The question lingered. Still, I pressed forward. I booked a hotel room in town so Alex and I wouldn't have to sleep on the lumpy couch in my parents' living room. I even asked my mom about the schedule so I wouldn't miss anything important. She was vague, though, saying only, we'll let you know the time once it's closer. I assumed she was busy, planning a big party is a lot of work. But then, strange things began to pile up. When I texted Jessica to ask what she was wearing for the party, she didn't reply. Usually, she was quick to talk about clothes, especially when it came to events where she'd be photographed. When I followed up, she sent back a single thumbs up emoji. Ryan, who normally had no problem hitting me up for favors, suddenly went quiet. My calls went to voicemail, and my texts got short, clipped answers. Yeah. Maybe. Not sure. It was unlike him. Even my mom, who usually filled our conversations with details, seemed to dodge my questions. So, who's coming to the party? I asked one afternoon on the phone. Oh, just a few folks, she said quickly, then changed the subject. Her evasiveness made my stomach twist. Still, I tried to shake it off. Maybe they were planning a surprise element. Maybe they didn't want me to know everything ahead of time. I kept telling myself not to overthink it. One night, as I wrapped the last of the gifts, Alex spoke up. Sam, have you noticed how quiet your family's been about this party? I looked up, startled. What do you mean? I mean, I've barely heard you talk about logistics. When are we supposed to arrive? What's the plan? Who else is coming? Usually, your mom gives you a full itinerary. I laughed nervously. She's probably just stressed. It's a big event. Alex didn't look convinced. Maybe. But Sam, what if they're leaving you out? The words hit like a dart. My chest tightened. Why would they do that? I asked, more to myself than to him. He shrugged, his eyes gentle. I don't know. But the way they've been acting, it feels off. I brushed it aside, but his words stuck with me. In the days that followed, the silence from my family grew louder. My texts went unanswered for hours, sometimes days. Calls got cut short. I told myself it was just the stress of party planning. That has to be it, I thought. Until one afternoon, scrolling through Instagram on my lunch break, I saw it, Jessica's post. A photo of our parents' backyard, strung with twinkle lights. Tables set up, covered in tablecloths and flowers. A big banner stretched across the patio that read, "Happy 50th, Dad." The caption said, "So blessed to celebrate this amazing milestone with family tonight. Everyone together, just like it should be. Everyone. Except me." My phone nearly slipped from my hand. My heart pounded in my ears as I zoomed in on the photo. There they were, my parents, Ryan, Jessica, even cousins and neighbors I recognized. Smiling, laughing, plates of food in front of them. And not a single word to me. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. My throat tightened. They knew I was planning to come. They knew I was bringing Alex. And they just left me out. When Alex came home that evening, he found me sitting on the couch, the wrapped gifts still stacked neatly by the door. I showed him the photo, my hands shaking. His jaw clenched as he looked at it. "Sam," he said quietly, "this wasn't an accident. They excluded you on purpose." The truth was undeniable. And it was only the beginning. I barely slept the night I saw that photo. My mind kept looping through the same questions. Why didn't they want me there? What had I done that was so wrong? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their smiling faces under the glow of those string lights, the words on Jessica's caption echoing, "Everyone together, just like it should be." The next morning, I called my mom. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. On the third attempt, she finally picked up, her voice artificially bright. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you?" "Mom," I said, my voice trembling, "I saw the pictures from Dad's birthday party." There was a pause on the other end, the kind where you can almost hear someone deciding what lie to tell. "Oh, that," she said lightly. "We just threw something small together at the last minute. Nothing fancy." Nothing fancy? My throat tightened. There were tables, flowers, a banner. Half the town was there. Why didn't anyone tell me? Another pause, longer this time. Then her voice shifted into that patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being dramatic. "Well, honey, we just assumed you'd be too busy. You've got your job, your life in Seattle, your boyfriend. We didn't want you to feel pressured to come all the way down for something so simple." Simple? I almost laughed, but it came out as a choked sound. "Mom, I told you I was coming. I bought gifts. I booked a hotel. Alex was excited to finally meet everyone. Why didn't you just say you didn't want me there?" "Oh, Sam," she said softly, like I was a child she needed to soothe. "Don't be so sensitive. We thought it would be easier this way." "Easier for who?" I wanted to scream. But before I could reply, she added, "Besides, Jessica remembered you saying once that our little hometown traditions felt boring to you. We didn't want you to feel stuck." I froze. "I never said that." "Well, that's what she remembered," Mom replied quickly. "And you know, your father gets so tired from the store, it just didn't seem like a good time to complicate things." Complicate things. That's what I was now, a complication. I ended the call as politely as I could, but the moment I hung up, I collapsed onto the couch, sobbing into my hands. Alex wrapped his arms around me, silent but solid. I felt like I had been punched in the chest, like all the air had been knocked out of me. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Sarah, my childhood best friend who still lived in town. "Hey, Sam. Your mom asked me to bring my apple pie to the birthday party. Everyone loved it. Wish you'd been there. Next time for sure." My stomach twisted. They hadn't just excluded me, they'd invited neighbors, extended family, even friends. Everyone except me. When I showed Alex, his face hardened. "Sam, this isn't just forgetfulness or a mix-up. This is deliberate. They didn't want you there." I wanted to argue, to defend them, to cling to the belief that my family loved me. But deep down, I knew he was right. That night, I scrolled through more photos. Jessica had posted a video of Dad blowing out candles on a 3-tier cake, everyone cheering. Ryan had tagged himself at the party with friends. Even my parents had posted a blurry photo on Facebook, captioned, "So grateful for family and friends who made Robert's 50th so special." Not a single mention of me. Not even a text that night to say they missed me. The betrayal sank in like ice water. For years, I had bent over backward for them, sending money, sacrificing my own dreams, showing up whenever they needed me. And when the time came for a milestone celebration, the kind of event families are supposed to treasure, they decided I wasn't worth including. It wasn't just being left out of a party. It was the message underneath: "You're not really one of us. You're just the wallet we call when we need something." I tried to push through the holidays after that, but everything felt tainted. The gifts I had wrapped sat in a corner of my apartment, unopened. I couldn't bring myself to mail them. What was the point of sending presents to people who didn't want me at their table? Alex tried to distract me. He suggested we go out to dinner, see a movie, start our own little traditions. I appreciated the effort, but the wound was too raw. Every time I saw a family gathered at a restaurant or laughing in the park, I felt that stabbing ache. By the time January rolled around, I told myself I had to move on. I couldn't keep replaying it in my head. Maybe they had their reasons. Maybe they'd apologize eventually. Maybe things would go back to normal. But then came the email. The subject line read, "Urgent matter." It was from my dad. I opened it with shaky hands, my chest tight, half hoping it might contain some explanation, maybe even an apology. Instead, the words burned across the screen. "Ryan's in trouble. We need $19,000 to cover his debt. Transfer it to the family account by the end of the month. Invoice attached." No, please. No, thank you. Not a single acknowledgement of the birthday party, of the pain they'd caused. Just an expectation, as if I were an ATM that had been temporarily out of service and now needed to start spitting out bills again. My heart pounded in my ears as I stared at the number. $19,000. Nearly half a year of rent for me. More than my entire emergency fund. And they were asking, no, demanding, it, less than a week after deliberately cutting me out of my father's milestone birthday. I turned the screen toward Alex. His eyes widened as he read. "Are you kidding me?" he said, his voice low with disbelief. "Sam, they excluded you, humiliated you, and now they're asking for $19,000? This isn't family. This is exploitation." For the first time, I didn't argue. I just sat there, staring at the email, my hands shaking, my world tilting on its axis. Because he was right. And that was the moment something inside me began to break. I sat frozen, staring at the email on my laptop screen. The number, $19,000, glared back at me like it was alive, pulsing with accusation. I should have been angry, maybe even indignant. But my first instinct was the same it had always been: how quickly can I pull the money together? That terrified me. Even after everything, the birthday betrayal, the lies, the years of being used, my brain still wanted to jump into rescue mode. Alex noticed. He crouched down in front of me, steadying my trembling hands. Sam, you're not really considering paying this, are you? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream no. But another part, the part that had been trained since childhood to solve everyone else's problems, whispered, yes, of course. Family needs you. I don't know, I admitted finally, my voice small. He shook his head, his jaw tight. They've conditioned you to think it's your job to fix everything. But this? $19,000, after excluding you from your own father's birthday? Sam, this isn't family. This is blackmail dressed up as duty. His words rattled me. Still, I couldn't just let it go. Against Alex's better judgment, I called my dad. He picked up on the first ring, which was unusual. Samantha, he said, skipping any greeting, did you get my email? Yes, Dad, I said cautiously. I saw it. But I have questions. What exactly happened? He sighed, like my request for details was an inconvenience. Ryan owes money. Gambling debt. If we don't pay it, he's in serious trouble. He needs this money to start fresh. Why isn't he paying it himself? I asked. Because he can't. My dad's tone sharpened. You know how it is. He made some mistakes, but he's your brother. Family sticks together. Why 19,000? I pressed. That's a very specific number. It's what he owes, Dad snapped. Don't get bogged down in the details. What matters is he needs a lifeline, and you're in a position to give it. I swallowed hard. Dad, don't you think it's strange to ask me for that kind of money right after leaving me out of the birthday celebration? The line went silent for a few seconds. Then his voice turned cold. Is that what this is about? You're holding a grudge over a party? We thought you were too busy with your city life to bother with small-town stuff. Jessica said you didn't care about those things anymore. My chest tightened. So now it's my fault I wasn't invited? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another call. Ryan. I switched over, my stomach in knots. Sam, Dad says you're giving him trouble about the money, Ryan said without preamble, his tone laced with irritation. I really need this. If I don't pay off the debt, things are going to get ugly. Ryan, why were you gambling with money you didn't have? I asked carefully. Don't lecture me, he snapped. You've always had everything handed to you. You don't know what it's like to struggle. I almost laughed out loud. Me, the one who worked through college, lived frugally for years, sent money home month after month, I didn't know what it was like to struggle. Ryan, I said, trying to stay calm, why didn't you have insurance or a plan to cover yourself if things went wrong? That's none of your business, he shot back. What matters is, I need 19,000, and you have it. Are you going to help me or not? My throat burned. I need to think about it. Well, don't think too long, he said. The deadline's the 31st. The casino won't wait. And then he hung up. I sat there, stunned, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. Not even an hour later, a text from Jessica lit up my phone. Come on, Sam. Don't be difficult about this. Ryan needs help. Family is family. It was like a script they'd all memorized. Family is family. Translation, your wallet is open, right? But I wasn't convinced. Something about the story didn't add up. So I made a call to Officer Miller, a childhood friend who worked at the local police department. After a bit of small talk, I asked casually, hey, have you heard anything about Ryan getting into trouble lately? He snorted. Heard about it? Everyone has. Your brother's been deep into sports betting. Lost big. Some guys he owes weren't too happy, and he ended up with a reckless conduct citation after a fight outside the casino. He's lucky they didn't press worse charges. My stomach dropped. Dad hadn't mentioned any of that. Did you say 19,000? I asked. Yeah, Miller replied. That's what he bragged he could win back in one night. Instead, he lost it. And now he's begging everyone he knows for bailouts. By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking. This wasn't about a one-time mistake. This was a pattern, reckless choices, zero accountability, and me expected to clean it up. That evening, still reeling, I called Eleanor, our longtime neighbor and practically a second mother to me growing up. She lowered her voice when I asked if she'd been at the birthday party. Oh, Samantha. I thought you just couldn't make it. Your mother told everyone you were too busy with work. The sting was sharp, but I pushed through. Eleanor, did you hear anything about Ryan's situation? There was a pause, then a sigh. I shouldn't be the one telling you this, but I care about you too much not to. At the party, I overheard your parents talking in the kitchen. They said, "Don't worry, Samantha will pay. She always does. She has no kids, no big expenses, she can afford it." The room spun. Eleanor hesitated, then added, "And your mother mentioned they'd changed their will recently. Said there wasn't much point in leaving you anything since you already had everything. That they'd focus on helping Jessica instead." I closed my eyes, fighting tears. Not only had they excluded me, mocked me, and planned to drain me of money, but now they were disinheriting me too. I hung up the phone, hollow inside. For the first time, the truth was undeniable. My family didn't love me for who I was. They loved what I could provide. I wasn't their daughter. I was their investment account. And suddenly, I knew something had to change. The night after I spoke with Eleanor, I couldn't stop pacing my apartment. Her words played on a loop in my head. "Don't worry, Samantha will pay. She always does." That was what my parents said about me. Not, "She'll be there for us," not, "She's dependable," not even, "She's loving." Just, "She'll pay." I stared at the unopened gifts stacked by my front door. The watch for Dad, the shawl for Mom, the tote for Jessica, the headphones for Ryan. All carefully chosen, wrapped with ribbons, waiting to be handed over in a moment that never came. Now they looked ridiculous. Like props in a play I'd been cast in without ever agreeing to the role. Alex found me at 2 in the morning, sitting on the living room floor with those gifts scattered around me. My hands were shaking as I pulled at the ribbons. "I can't keep doing this," I whispered. He sat beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. "Then don't. Sam, you've given them enough. It's time to take care of yourself." But it wasn't that simple. Decades of conditioning pressed down on me, whispering in my ear. "If you say no, you're abandoning them. If you say no, you're a bad daughter, a selfish sister." The guilt was suffocating. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick to work. I told my boss I wasn't well. It wasn't a lie exactly. I felt hollow, drained, like my bones had been replaced with sand. I needed time to think. I spent the morning combing through old messages from my family. Texts that started with, "Hey, how are you?" but always ended with requests. "Can you send some money for rent? Can you cover the electric bill? Can you transfer a little extra for books?" Hundreds of variations of the same theme. I realized, with a painful clarity, that not one of those threads ended with "thank you." Not one turned into a conversation about my life. Later that day, I met my colleague Claire for coffee. She had once told me she'd cut ties with her own toxic family, and I needed to hear from someone who'd walked this path. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," she admitted, sipping her latte, "but also the most necessary. Family isn't supposed to drain you. It's supposed to build you up. Saying no doesn't mean you don't love them, it means you love yourself enough to stop the abuse." Her words hit me like a lifeline. Abuse. I had never thought of it that way before. But that's exactly what it was, financial abuse, dressed up as duty and obligation. That night, I booked an emergency appointment with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. Even one session cracked me open. She listened to my story, nodding gently, before saying, "Samantha, your worth isn't tied to what you can give them. Love that comes with invoices and demands isn't love, it's control." I left her office with tears streaming down my face, but also with something else: resolve. For the first time in my life, I was ready to say no. The next morning, I sat at my desk with my laptop open and a blank email draft on the screen. My heart hammered in my chest. My palms were slick with sweat. But slowly, painfully, I began to type. "Dear Dad, Mom, Jessica, and Ryan," I wrote. My fingers trembled, but I kept going. I explained that after careful thought, I would not be providing the $19,000 for Ryan's debt. I laid out the facts: his choices were reckless, his debt was his responsibility, and it was not my job to clean up the consequences. Then I went further. I told them I could no longer continue the pattern of financial support that had defined our relationship for years. No more emergency expenses. No more loans that were never repaid. No more handouts disguised as family duty. I wrote that I hoped one day we could rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect and love rather than money, but that it would require significant changes from them. When I reached the end, I signed it simply, Samantha. I stared at the email for what felt like hours. My finger hovered over the send button. The old voices screamed in my head, "You're abandoning them. You'll regret this. They'll never forgive you." But another voice, quieter but steadier, spoke too, "You deserve better." I clicked send. The moment it left my outbox, I felt like I'd jumped off a cliff. Terrified. Free. But I wasn't done. Alex sat beside me as I pulled up my banking app. With deliberate precision, I transferred exactly $10 to each of them, Dad, Mom, Jessica, and Ryan, with a memo line that read, "This is all you deserve after how you've treated me." It was petty, yes. But after years of funneling thousands of dollars into a bottomless pit, it felt like reclaiming a tiny piece of power. When I closed my laptop, Alex looked at me with something I hadn't seen in my own eyes for years: pride. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Terrified," I admitted. Then I took a deep breath. But also, free. The email had barely been in their inbox an hour before my phone started lighting up like a Christmas tree. Text messages, voicemails, even emails piled up, one after another. Each notification made my chest tighten, but I forced myself not to open them right away. I knew what was waiting for me: guilt, anger, manipulation. Finally, curiosity, or maybe duty, got the better of me. I opened the first message. It was from my mom. "How dare you? After everything this family has done for you, you turn your back on us in our time of need? We raised you better than this. Family is forever. This is unforgivable." My chest burned as I read the words. After everything this family has done for you? I wanted to scream. What had they done besides drain me dry? Next came a voicemail from my dad. His voice was icy, each word deliberate. "You'll regret this decision, Samantha. Family doesn't abandon family. You're acting like a stranger. One day you'll need us, and when you do, don't expect us to be there." It wasn't disappointment. It was a threat. Jessica's text was more predictable: "Wow. Way to show your true colors. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're proving it by refusing to help when I'm finally happy. Hope your fancy Seattle life keeps you warm at night." And then Ryan, "You're selfish. Flat out. You know I'm in danger and you don't care. If something happens to me, it's on you." Each message was a knife, twisting in its own way. Guilt. Anger. Blame. I could practically see them huddled together, feeding each other lines, united in outrage against me. I turned my phone off and shoved it in a drawer. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. But underneath the fear was something else: anger. Not just at them, but at myself, for letting this go on so long. Alex came home to find me curled on the couch, staring at the dark TV. I told him what they'd said, and his face flushed with fury. Sam, do you hear yourself? They're threatening you, manipulating you, blaming you for their mistakes. That's not love. That's control. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I know. But it still hurts. The days that followed were brutal. My mom left long voicemails, her tone swinging from tearful to furious within minutes. You're my daughter. How can you do this to me? Do you hate us that much? Then, you're cold, Samantha. You've let that city harden you. My dad doubled down on threats. In one voicemail, he said, maybe I should talk to a lawyer about what obligations children have to their parents. You think you can just walk away? I knew it was empty bluster, no law could force me to pay my brother's debts, but the venom in his voice rattled me. Even extended family joined in. An aunt I hadn't spoken to in years called to say she was disappointed in how selfish I'd become. A cousin texted, the whole family says you've changed. Money's made you arrogant. It was like they'd launched a campaign, each one trying a different tactic, shame, threats, pity, to break me down. For the first time in my life, I didn't respond. Not with apologies, not with money, not even with explanations. I copied and pasted the same sentence to everyone who pushed, I've made my decision. I hope we can rebuild our relationship with mutual respect, but that requires change from all of us. It felt robotic at first, but after a while, repeating those words gave me strength. Still, the silence that followed was deafening. I'd spent so long defining myself by being the good daughter, the rescuer, that without that role, I felt empty. Who was I, if not the one holding my family together with my bank account? Alex held me through more than one breakdown that month. Sam, he said one night as I cried into his chest, their anger isn't proof that you're wrong. It's proof that your boundaries are working. They're upset because they can't control you anymore. It took time, but slowly, I began to believe him. To protect myself, I made practical changes. I met with a financial advisor, reorganized my accounts, changed all my passwords, and removed family members as beneficiaries from insurance policies. I scheduled sessions with my therapist weekly, learning how to untangle guilt from love, duty from abuse. The storm from my family didn't calm overnight. They tried new tactics, my mom sobbing that they might lose the store, my dad hinting at bankruptcy, Jessica posting cryptic statuses online about betrayal. But with each attempt, I grew stronger. Every time I said no, it became easier to say it again. And for the first time in my life, I started to see a future where I wasn't just the family wallet. A future where my worth wasn't measured in dollar signs, but in the boundaries I held, the life I was building for myself. The fallout had been ugly. But beneath the wreckage, something new was forming. The beginning of freedom. 3 weeks passed before I heard anything from Ryan that wasn't angry or manipulative. By then, the noise from my family had quieted, not because they'd accepted my decision, but because their tactics weren't working anymore. They'd burned through outrage, guilt, and threats, and when I didn't cave, the silence settled in like a storm that had finally blown itself out. One Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was another guilt trip from some distant relative. But something in my gut told me to pick up. Sam. The voice on the other end was tired, strained. It was Ryan. I braced myself. Yeah, it's me. Can we meet? He asked, hesitating. Just you and me. No mom, no dad, no Jessica. I want to talk. I didn't answer right away. My instinct was to protect myself, to assume this was just another angle. But something about his voice, less demanding, more weary, made me pause. Finally, I agreed. Okay. Coffee shop, Saturday. Neutral ground. When I walked into the cafe that weekend, I almost didn't recognize him. Ryan looked older than 31. His shoulders slumped, dark circles rimmed his eyes, and his hands fidgeted on the table. Gone was the cocky brother who always bragged about his schemes. What sat in front of me was someone humbled, maybe even broken. "Thanks for coming," he muttered, not quite meeting my eyes. I sat down cautiously. "What do you want to talk about?" He exhaled sharply. "First, I need to apologize. For the way I treated you. For the messages. For everything." The words caught me off guard. Apologies were rare in my family, almost unheard of. My chest tightened as I studied him, trying to figure out if this was real or just another manipulation. "Ryan," I started, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I've been awful to you. Not just recently, but for years. Every time I got into trouble, I ran to you. I never once thought about how it made you feel, or what it cost you. I just assumed you'd bail me out. Because you always did." I stayed quiet, my throat thick. "I didn't even think of it as wrong," he admitted. "I thought, well, she's got a good job, she's doing fine, she won't miss it. But your email, it hit me. You called me out for what it was, irresponsible. And you were right. I've been reckless, entitled, and selfish. And I put it all on you to fix." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it out slowly. Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. "This is a repayment plan. For the down payment you gave me for my apartment years ago. I know I said I'd pay you back and never did. But I need to make this right. It's not much, but I can do monthly installments. 3 years. I'll stick to it." I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It wasn't fancy, just a handwritten chart with dates and amounts, but the effort nearly brought me to tears. "Ryan, why now?" I asked softly. He rubbed his temples. "Because when you cut me off, I finally had to face myself. I realized I've been living like a kid while you've been carrying the weight of all of us. I don't want to be that guy anymore." He looked up at me, his eyes raw. "I don't expect forgiveness overnight. But I need you to know I'm trying." For the first time in years, I saw my brother not as a burden, but as a man finally reckoning with himself. We talked for nearly 2 hours. He told me about the fallout of his gambling, how he'd been forced to sell some of his belongings, how he'd taken on extra shifts at a warehouse job just to stay afloat. He admitted he hated it, but he also admitted it was the first time he'd ever truly had to stand on his own 2 feet. When our conversation wound down, I said quietly, "I'm proud of you for taking responsibility." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "First time for everything." As we stood to leave, he hesitated. "Sam, thank you. Not just for meeting me. For saying no. It hurt at first, but now I get it. If you hadn't cut me off, I'd still be sinking, dragging you down with me. You might have saved me without even meaning to." The lump in my throat nearly choked me. When I got back to my apartment that evening, Alex was waiting. "How'd it go?" he asked. I handed him the folded repayment plan. He raised his eyebrows. "Wow. That's unexpected." "Yeah," I said softly, still processing. "For once, it feels like maybe something good came out of all this. It wasn't a miracle. It didn't erase the pain of the betrayal or the cruelty of the messages. But Ryan's apology cracked something open in me, a tiny, fragile hope that maybe not everything in my family was broken beyond repair. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that change, real change, might actually be possible. Ryan's apology didn't magically fix everything, but it planted a seed. For weeks afterward, I kept that repayment plan folded in my journal, tucked between pages like a fragile bookmark of hope. Sometimes I would take it out just to remind myself that maybe, just maybe, change was possible. But hope is a complicated thing. It doesn't erase scars, and it certainly doesn't make toxic patterns disappear overnight. My parents and Jessica still hadn't apologized. They still hadn't acknowledged the birthday betrayal. The silence from them was deafening, though occasionally punctuated by passive-aggressive texts from Jessica or the occasional "we're disappointed in you" message from Mom. Then, in late March, Mom reached out. Her text was short and oddly formal: "We'd like to talk. Just us. No demands. Can you come down for the weekend?" I stared at the message for a long time, my heart torn between dread and curiosity. When I showed Alex, he frowned. "Do you think it's genuine, or just another trap?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But part of me wants to find out." We decided I wouldn't go alone. Alex came with me, though we agreed he'd stay at a hotel nearby while I met with my parents. Just knowing he was close made me feel braver. When I walked into my childhood home that Saturday, the air felt heavy with old memories. The same worn couch, the same smell of coffee and dust, the same creak in the floorboard by the hallway. My mom looked thinner, more tired. My dad looked older, the lines around his mouth deeper. "Samantha," Mom said stiffly, hugging me like I was a guest. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad." We sat in the living room, the silence stretching so long it felt unbearable. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to say, maybe we went too far." My eyebrows shot up. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was closer than I'd ever heard from him. Mom sighed. "It was wrong to leave you out of your father's birthday. That wasn't fair." She didn't meet my eyes, but the words landed all the same. Something inside me softened, though I kept my guard up. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It hurt a lot." Dad leaned forward. "But Samantha, you have to understand, we were desperate. Ryan was drowning. We didn't know what else to do." I shook my head firmly. "You did know what else to do. You could have let him face the consequences of his actions. But instead, you came after me. Again. That can't keep happening." The room fell silent again. My mom fiddled with the edge of her sweater. "We've been talking," she said finally. "And maybe we've leaned on you too much. It's just, you're the strong one. You've always been the one we could count on." "That doesn't make it right," I said gently but firmly. "I want a relationship with you, but not one based on money. If we're going to move forward, we need new boundaries. Clear ones." For the first time, my parents didn't argue. They didn't guilt me. They just nodded, looking worn and uncertain, like they weren't sure how to live without leaning on me. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Jessica, on the other hand, was a different story. When I texted her to suggest grabbing coffee while I was in town, she replied, "Why? So you can lecture me like you did Ryan?" Hard pass. Then she posted on social media later that day, "Some people love to act holier than thou when they're really just selfish." I knew it was about me. Everyone knew. It stung, but not the way it used to. For once, I didn't feel the urge to fix it, to beg for her approval. Instead, I let her have her tantrum and focused on the small progress I was making with Mom and Dad. Before I left that weekend, Dad walked me to the door. He shifted uncomfortably, then said, "I don't know if we can change overnight. But I want to try." I looked at him, really looked at him, the man who had once been my hero, who had taught me how to ride a bike and patch a flat tire, who had later turned me into a lifeline he never deserved. "Trying is all I'm asking for," I said softly. When I drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, hope. It wasn't the neat resolution I craved, but it was real. Back in Seattle, I threw myself into therapy and work. I set rules for myself: no transferring money to family, no cosigning loans, no bending over backward to solve problems that weren't mine. Each time I enforced those rules, I felt a little stronger, a little freer. Ryan kept in touch, too. True to his word, he sent me the first installment of his repayment plan. It wasn't much, but it was more about the principle. For the first time in our adult lives, he was taking responsibility. It made me think that maybe, just maybe, boundaries weren't the end of family. Maybe they were the only way to build a healthier one. The road ahead was still rocky, I knew that. Jessica was furious, my parents were tentative, and years of resentment and habit wouldn't dissolve overnight. But I wasn't doing this to make them happy anymore. I was doing it to save myself. And for the first time, that felt like enough. By the time Easter rolled around, nearly 4 months had passed since I sent that email. 4 months of silence broken only by occasional, tentative messages from my parents and the steady, surprising consistency of Ryan's repayment plan. 4 months of therapy sessions where I peeled back layers of guilt and obligation, learning to separate love from duty, boundaries from betrayal. So when Mom called in late March and said, "We'd like you to come home for Easter," I didn't answer right away. She rushed to fill the silence. No big party. Just family. Dinner after church. "We want you there, Samantha. Please." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time, I believed she meant it. Not as a setup, not as an excuse to ask for money, but as a genuine request. Still, I hesitated. "Mom, you know things can't go back to the way they were." "I know," she said softly. "We're trying." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Alex insisted on coming with me, even though I warned him it might be tense. "I don't care if it's awkward," he said. "You're not walking into that house alone." His quiet steadiness grounded me in ways I didn't know I needed until moments like this. When we pulled into the driveway that Easter Sunday, the house looked the same as it always had, the faded paint, the squeaky screen door, the flower beds half weedy and half blooming. But inside, things felt different. Mom greeted us at the door, pulling me into a hug that lasted a beat longer than usual. Dad shook Alex's hand stiffly but sincerely. Ryan appeared from the kitchen, carrying a casserole, and grinned sheepishly. "Hey, Sam." "Hey," I said, surprised at how natural it felt. Jessica, however, barely looked at me. She sat on the couch scrolling her phone, muttering a quick, "Hi," without making eye contact. Her hostility hung in the air like static electricity, ready to spark at any moment. Dinner was simple: ham, potatoes, green beans, the same meal Mom had made every Easter since I was a kid. Conversation was stilted at first, full of awkward pauses and forced small talk. But slowly, it loosened. Ryan told a funny story about his warehouse job, Dad reminisced about past Easters, and Alex charmed everyone with his calm, easy humor. At one point, Mom turned to me and said, "I want to thank you for coming, Samantha. I know things haven't been easy lately. But it means a lot to have you here." I nodded, swallowing hard. It means a lot to be invited. The room went quiet at that, but no one argued. For once, the truth was allowed to hang in the air without being twisted into guilt or denial. After dinner, as we lingered over pie, Jessica finally snapped. "So what, are we all just going to pretend nothing happened? That Sam didn't abandon us when we needed her most?" The table froze. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I didn't abandon anyone, Jess. I stopped funding bad choices." "That's not the same thing." Her eyes flashed. "Easy for you to say, Miss Perfect job in Seattle. Some of us don't have it as easy." "Jessica," Ryan said quietly, "it's not about easy. Sam's right. We've been using her. I've been using her. It's not fair." Jessica gaped at him, betrayed. "You're siding with her?" "I'm not siding with anyone," he replied. "I'm owning my mistakes. Maybe you should try it." The tension was thick enough to choke on. Jessica pushed her chair back and stormed out of the dining room, muttering something about selfish hypocrites. The screen door slammed a moment later. I sat frozen, bracing for Mom or Dad to run after her. But instead, Mom sighed heavily and said, "She'll cool off. She just doesn't want to face the truth yet." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My parents weren't defending her tantrum. They weren't blaming me. They were letting it be. Later, as Alex and I drove back to the hotel, I stared out the window, processing. The dinner hadn't been perfect, it had been tense, messy, full of old wounds, but it was real. My parents were trying, Ryan was changing, and even Jessica's resistance was part of the process. "Proud of you," Alex said quietly, squeezing my hand. "Why?" I asked, still lost in thought. "Because you walked in there with boundaries, and you didn't bend. And look what happened, your brother's changing, your parents are softening. That's because of you." I swallowed hard, tears pricking my eyes. For so long, I had believed the only way to hold my family together was to give until I had nothing left. But here, for the first time, I saw another way, holding my boundaries, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it meant confrontation. It wasn't the Easter I had dreamed of as a child. But it was the first one that felt like a step towards something healthier. And that was enough. 6 months after that email, the one where I told my family I wouldn't pay Ryan's debt, my life feels unrecognizable. For the first time, I'm not living under the constant weight of obligation. The silence on my phone is no longer something that makes me anxious, it's something I treasure. The biggest change is inside me. I don't jump when my phone buzzes. I don't scramble to fix problems that aren't mine. I don't measure my worth by how much I can give. My therapist calls it detangling identity from servitude, but I just call it breathing easier. Work has blossomed, too. Without constant financial drain, I was able to say yes to a professional development program I'd been putting off. 2 months ago, I was promoted. My boss said, "You're finally stepping into your potential." He doesn't know the half of it, how many years I spent shackled to my family's expectations, afraid to put myself first. Alex and I got engaged last month. He proposed in the park where we had our first date, nothing flashy, just the two of us with a picnic and a ring he said represented a life built together, not drained away. I cried, of course, but not from sadness. From the joy of realizing I had built something separate from the chaos, something stable and full of love. Ryan continues to surprise me. He's kept up with his repayment plan, even sending me photos of the checks he mails. They're not huge amounts, but every envelope is proof that he's trying. He still has a long way to go, but for once, I'm not carrying him. He's carrying himself. My parents are cautious around me now, careful not to ask for too much. Sometimes their texts still drip with guilt, but I no longer feel compelled to answer. When I do visit, the conversations are different, lighter, even. We talk about books, about the weather, about Alex and my job. It's awkward sometimes, but it's real. Jessica, well, she hasn't changed. She avoids me at gatherings, still posts cryptic rants online. But for the first time, that doesn't control me. I've learned that healing doesn't require everyone to come along. Some people will stay stuck. And that's okay. The best part is what I've started giving back, not to my family, but to myself and others like me. I volunteer once a week with a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy to young women. Standing in front of them, I tell my story, about being the family wallet, about learning to set boundaries, about realizing that love without respect isn't love at all. Sometimes, when I see their eyes widen in recognition, I know I'm not alone. And neither are they. I still love my family. That hasn't changed. But love doesn't mean emptying my pockets or sacrificing my peace. Love, I've learned, must flow both ways. And if it doesn't, it's okay to step back. For the first time in my life, I'm not the family wallet. I'm just Samantha. A woman who knows her worth. A woman who's finally free. This was my story. If you've ever felt like the family wallet, share your story in the comments, I'd love to hear it.